Welcome to the Bhagavata podcast. I'm Måns Broo, a senior lecturer at Åbo Akademi University in Finland and a senior research fellow at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. I'll be a host for this podcast inspired by the work of the Gaudiya Studies research project at the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies. Thank you for joining us for the Bhagavata podcast. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langhayate girim yat kripatamaham vande srigurum dinataranam. My name is Bhrigupada, and today I'm very honored and happy to again be joined by Krishna Kshetra Swami Maharaj. Thank you for joining me.
And thank you for having me again.
We've reached the fifth chapter, and at the end of the fourth chapter, we heard how Vyasa up there in Badarika Ashram in the Himalayas, having done all the wonderful things that he had already done, divided up the Vedas for the benefit of the slow and unfortunate and stupid people of Kali Yuga.
Manda sumanda matayo, manda bhagya hi upadruta.
Unfortunate as well, yes.
Yes.
So for the benefit of all of us, he had divided up the Vedas, and then he had written the Mahabharata with the help of Ganesha, and done so many different things, but still he's feeling dissatisfied. He's having some kind of a maybe we could even call it like an existential crisis. And that's where the previous chapter ended. Not only with that, but then with the arrival of his guru, Narada. As Prabhupada likes to call him, the Transcendental spaceman.
Yes. Playing his veena.
Yes.
I just looked that up. I mean, this is just a detail. He's called Vinapani, is one of his epithets. Yeah, it's the first verse, Vinapani. And I looked up Veena because I became curious about the history of Venas. Veena is mentioned in the Rig Veda already. And it means basically any stringed instrument. But it seems that Narada is credited with inventing the tampura. So it could be that the type of veena that he's carrying is a tampura, for what that's worth. But I interrupted you.
No problem. I mean, that does make sense also, because the veena that is famous under that name today, that's maybe not an instrument that you play while you're traveling. It's quite a challenging instrument. Anyway, we're entering now the fifth chapter. What's going to happen in this chapter, Maharaj? Can you give us an overview?
As you said, Narada appears. He has a way of appearing at just the right time in the Bhagavatam. He comes and saves the day. In this case, Vyasa's existential crisis. And basically he confirms Vyasa's doubt. And he speaks quite strongly to him that, in effect, everything he's done so far, all of his composing, not only has it been more or less a waste of time, even though he said it's very, very well composed, what you've done, but it's a waste of time. But then he actually speaks more strongly than that. He says, what you've written misguides people. It's actually misguiding people to continue material life, continue with the pursuit of mundane activities and aspirations. So he kind of scolds him. And at one point, Narada is going to tell, or begin to tell, sort of his own story of how he becomes Narada. And he's, I'm jumping ahead because he speaks about, at some length, he speaks about what should be written about, namely the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's saying the only thing worth hearing about really is the Supreme Lord, glorification of the Lord. And he kind of gives an interesting, you could say, philosophy of writing. We might get into that when we come to those verses. And then what strikes me, I think, is how Narada, in a sense, becomes, by his description of himself and how he becomes Narada, he's kind of giving himself as an example of what was described in the second chapter of the Bhagavatam, first canto, about the process of bhakti yoga. It's that sort of summary that's given. So now Narada is recapitulating that, telling, this is what I did. This is how I became who I am.
Would you say, Maharaj, that it's fair to say that Narada is telling Vyasa that the only real spiritual teaching is that which follows the path of nivritti, of detachment and leaving this world? Because that seems, on one level at least, to be what he's saying, that all of this that Vyasa had done before, trying to teach people a gradual path of spiritual elevation through the Mahabharata and so on, that you live a dharmic family life and then you'll gradually learn all of these things. It seems to me, listening to what you were just saying, and also thinking about what Narada is doing in other places of the Bhagavatam, it seems that he's discounting all of that, and he's telling Vyasa that this is just the kind of cheating, and that you should just give up everything. Like, I mean, he does that with other people in the Bhagavatam. The sons of Daksha, for example, famously later on in the fourth canto. This is kind of heavy to read for a materially attached householder such as myself.
Yeah, well, he's one thing is he's echoing, what is it, the second verse of the first chapter, Dharma projita kaita votra paramo nirmatsaranam satam. And I think I mentioned last time that the Bhagavatam has this kind of spiraling structure. It gives a seed and then it expands, there's a sprout, and it comes around again to the same points, but in a more elaborate way. So, but it's not that Narada is promoting moksha. It's not, there's dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. He's not promoting moksha as such. He's promoting, I think, very much in this chapter, glorification of the Lord as that which is, the final solution. Verse number 15, I have it here. The people in general are naturally inclined to enjoy, and you've encouraged them in that way in the name of religion. This is verily condemned and is quite unreasonable in Srila Prabhupada's translation. Because they are guided under your instructions, they will accept such activities in the name of religion and will hardly care for prohibitions. So that's on the level of Dharma, but I think it goes beyond that to emphasize glorification. What should Vyasa be doing? He should be glorifying the Lord. And that will, and there's this very strong statement, verse number 10, Na yat vachas chitra padam harer yasho jagat pavitram prakranita karichit tat vayasam tirtam ushanti manasa nayatra hangsa niramanti ushik kshaya. I looked up ushik kshaya, I couldn't find it. But Vyasam Tirtam, a tirta for crows, literature which is, which is not glorifying the Lord, Hare Yasha, is Vyasam Tirtam.
And I mean, that's a very, very exact description, that you could argue. Crows being interested in rubbish and refuse. And much of literature, of course, is about bringing up the bad sides of humanity and examining them and playing on our interest in the lower modes of nature, maybe you could say. But then the next verse here, of course, is a wonderful contrast to this. The 11th verse, where he says, Tadvag visargo janatagha viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abhaddhavatyapi namanyanantasya shongitani yat shrinvanti gayanti grinanti sadhava.
Sadhava, yes.
And Prabhupada here, I think last time when I spoke with you, you mentioned the King James Bible and
yes,
and the
it
kind of
became
language.
classical. It became classical English.
Yes, and at least for people who have grown up with Prabhupada's translations, there's this is a verse that they're going to remember. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So that's thoroughly honest people. That's Prabhupada's translation of sadhava here.
Sadhava, yes. And he translates the word viplava as revolutionary. And abadhavati is translated as irregularly composed. So even if it's imperfectly, in terms of Sanskrit aesthetics, poetic, the rules of Sanskrit poetry and so on, that's okay. What's important is the message. And actually that's recognized also by the Vaishnava aestheticians. I was just hearing from our Dr. Lutya Harms Gopinath Acharya a few days ago. He was saying that Rupa Goswami recognizes that it's what's important is rasa, and thus what is less important is alankar. There's so many rules of alankar, but they're not so important as rasa. So that would fit in with what this verse is saying. Narada already understood that before Rupa Goswami.
And that this is a verse full of consolation for us as well, who or for me at least, who am not always able to convey what I'm trying to say in the perfect way. So even
Yes.
Narada is saying that.
Yeah. Yes.
Prabhupada has a long purport here to this verse, where he's speaking about India and China, and reading that purport, I'm thinking about the political situation between those two countries in the early 60s. They had fought a war over parts of northern Kashmir. And Prabhupada mentions this, that these two great civilizations, they're fighting over worthless land because of not having the proper guidance. And I think this is something that is quite beautiful in Prabhupada's writing here, that he's so much concerned that this teaching be broadcasted so that it can bring about this revolution in people's thinking and understanding.
Yes, he was writing in that vein already in the 1940s, during World War II. I think he started Back to Godhead in 1944. And one of his kind of key messages was the problem is that there's no God consciousness, and therefore I'm presenting God consciousness from the Bhagavatam, and this is containing the peace formula, and so on. Yes.
But going back to my previous question about Narada and nivritti and renunciation and so on, there's quite a lot of emphasis on that in the Bhagavatam. Most of the
Yes.
big heroes of the Bhagavatam are renunciants.
Or they are kings who, yes, they're kings who then renounce and become completely renounced. Of course, starting with Parikshit Maharaj, and then there's Bharata, and there's, well, you could say, I suppose, there's Dhruva. Of course, in a sense, it's the other way around with him, but then Rishabdev. There's a kind of pattern, isn't it? There's a king, and the king renounces and gives up everything and goes to the forest and meditates, and or he gets educated by his guru. Yeah.
And when they give up everything, they quite often literally give up everything, wandering around the world naked and without any
Yes.
any possessions or anything like that. And I
Yes.
mean, to me at least, that especially when I was young, I found that to be an extremely attractive idea. Perhaps not wandering around naked, but the idea of giving up everything and just kind of following the will of the Lord. Now that seems to me to be a rather distant idea, and perhaps
Yes.
to many people this can feel kind of scary. That what can we
Yes.
actually learn from these so detached and renounced people? How can they speak to us? I mean, you are a Maharaj, a Swami, but still.
That is, I would say, one of the challenges of the Bhagavatam. I'm just thinking now of Devahuti near the end of the Canto 3, and she's lamenting that I've wasted my life because I've been absorbed in material activities. and she begs for her son, Kapila, to enlighten her. So that sense of remorse is also there. But your question is, how can we relate to that? And I think one point is the Bhagavatam sort of intentionally keeps, it has a certain sharp edge to it. It's not meant to be soft. It's meant to shake us a little bit, or a lot. There's going to be a lot more of that in throughout the Bhagavatam. In the first few verses of the first canto, of the second canto, Shukadev Goswami is going to speak quite sharply about material life, and that's going to be a theme that extends through the Bhagavatam. So it's not really meant to make us feel good about ourselves. You know, it's meant to make us, I think, feel a bit uncomfortable, and to sort of face the reality of the danger of material existence.
What could we then say to, because I'm thinking of this, and oftentimes when I read these kind of descriptions, I may feel that they are far away from myself, but I can still find them inspiring and and kind of awakening or shaking me in a good way. But I realize that there are many people who might react in a different way. Like, for example, with kids, a kid who is growing up in a safe and stable environment is able to take corrections and even chastisement from the kid's parents. But a kid from a different kind of background, with less security and so on, is not able to take that. And I sometimes see that with readers of the Bhagavatam as well. If you don't have a kind of faith that God actually wants what is good for you, and the saints want what is good for you, you might be quite unsettled by the Bhagavatam. Do you have any advice for a person like that?
One advice is back up and start with Bhagavad Gita.
So basically give up.
Not give up, put it aside, perhaps. Srila Prabhupada used to say that the Bhagavad Gita is the ABCs of spiritual life, and the Bhagavatam is the graduate study. So maybe before jumping into the graduate study, someone needs to first do the ABCs. That may not sound very reassuring, but it may be a necessary point. You know. On the other hand, the Bhagavatam is, of course, attractive because it tells stories. And it could be, for example, well, take this chapter, starting with verse 23. Narada begins to tell his story. And so one can immediately jump into, oh, what happened then? And then what happened? And then what happened? And then one is pulled in and naturally may identify with the person, especially when it's spoken like this in first person rather than third person. It can actually, I think, be quite powerful. So he says, in the last millennium, and that's already interesting. Oh, he remembers his life, his previous life. How is that? I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of brahmanas.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but this being a son of a maidservant, that seems to be a theme in ancient Indian literature. I mean, that's the same with Satyakama Jabala
Oh,
in
yes.
the Upanishads, in the Chandogya Upanishad, and
Chandogya,
and
yeah.
and being the son of a maid servant seems to mean that you're born out of wedlock,
Right.
and
Yes.
that maybe you don't even know who your father is. I mean, Satyakama at least didn't know.
Yes.
So Narada is basically saying that in his previous life he came from not a very privileged background.
Yes. And it could be as you said, a polite way of saying it, he's an illegitimate child. But that in itself is also implying the inclusiveness of the Bhagavatam, isn't it? That
Yes.
he's come from a quote-unquote fallen background, and yet he becomes elevated by associating with these brahmanas who are, as Prabhupada translates, followers of Vedanta. Yeah.
This theme of association, of course, is an important theme here, and I think it's important to note for those who are not that conversant with the language of this text that association, of course, is sangha, and sangha in Sanskrit means company or or staying with other people, but it also means attachment. And previously it had been mentioned that I think, which verse was that, about medicine, that the problem of attachment can be solved by another kind of attachment.
Yes, I think that comes a bit later.
It comes later, okay.
Yes, verse 33. O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing?
So the disease of attachment can be cured then by attachment to the saints.
Right. Yeah, that's the idea. In the next verse, he says, thus, when all of a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. So those same activities can be transformed. In this verse, Narada is specifically saying that this transformation process is about dedicating activities to the Lord, the same activities that before were samsriti hetu, causes of material existence. Those same activities are now liberating, kalpante kalpita pare, dedicated unto para, unto the Supreme. So that's hopeful. It kind of, I think, responds to the concern you expressed before. How can anyone relate to this? Well, you're doing so many things in your life. Just redirect them to be parakalpita, to the Lord, and then you will be freed.
So the problem with everything that Vyasa had done previously, the Mahabharata and so on, would you say that the problem wasn't that it was directed to householders, but rather that it was lacking in glorification of the Lord?
Yes, I don't think Narada anywhere says, that the problem is you're speaking to householders.
Mm, mm.
He's because the Bhagavatam is also speaking to householders, isn't it? One thing struck me, verse 37. Just before this, Narada's talking about, in a way, he's talking about what seems like karma yoga, and then transforming that into bhakti yoga. And then in verse 37, it seems almost a little bit out of the blue, comes this prayer, Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam Vasudevaya Dhimahi Pradyumnaya Niruddhaya Nama Sankarshanaya Cha. And I always wondered about this, but this is, can I tell you my theory?
Of course, please.
My theory is that this is a flag that the Bhagavatam is very much including Pancharatra. First of all, because Narada is so prominent, and we associate Narada very much with the Pancharatra tradition. And here we have Narada speaking to Vyasa about what to write about. And he should glorify the Lord. And then he gives an example of how to glorify the Lord as a pranam mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam. And what is this mantra? Well, it's kind of, you could say, classic Pancharatra, because it's describing the four vyuhas, the first expansions of Narayana. As I understand, you know better than I about Pancharatra, but very much more. This is a basic principle that's common to Pancharatra, can we say? That it's describing the Lord's expansions on different levels, coming eventually to the Archa Vigraha. So I just found that to be an interesting, like a flag pointing in that direction.
I agree. I also find this verse to be very interesting. And one reason for it is that some scholars and have created a kind of dichotomy between Bhagavatas on one hand and Pancharatrins on the other hand. And as if these two groups are first of all separate, but also slightly antagonistic towards each other. And sometimes it's argued that the Bhagavata Purana is critical of Pancharatra and dismissive of Pancharatra. And as you say, I mean, Narada, he's a central person in all the Pancharatra. I think all the Pancharatras have Narada as a speaker or at least an important person.
Yeah.
And this is a very Pancharatric mantra. It also brings to mind it's not formally a Gayatri. It's written in Anushtup, not Gayatri, but
it has the word Dhimahi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It does kind of nod towards Gayatri as well.
Yes. Gayatri Bhasya Rupavasau, says the what is it, Garuda Purana?
Yeah.
One of the Puranas. That the Bhagavata is a commentary on the Gayatri. So you could also say that this verse is sort of hinting, yes, we're talking about Gayatri here. And then the next verse, verse 38, perhaps we can say it also indicates further that there is this blending of Pancharatra and Bhagavata, because iti murti abhidanena mantra murtim amurtikam yajate yagya purusham sasamyak darshana punah. He is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation, mantra murti. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, who has no material form, amurtikam. So, of course, murti is very central. The notion of murti and murti seva is very central to Pancharatra. And I guess that will come back in the story of Dhruva when Narada meets Dhruva, and Dhruva makes a murti and worships with a mantra.
I wanted to go back to the beginning here of Narada's story, because I find that there's two very interesting things there. One is that his love for Krishna is awakened by first by listening to these Vedantins. I think Prabhupada calls them Bhakti Vedantins somewhere as well.
Yes.
And he's listening, and by this listening, he gets taste for the Supreme Lord. But even before that, it's mentioned that once, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus, being engaged, I became purified in heart. And then after that, he started to listen. So there seems to be this idea of Mahaprasada, or the great mercy of the saints, embodied in their food leavings, seems to be found here as well.
The remnants. Yes. Yeah, and that ties also into Pancharatra, doesn't it? Because that's an important element of Murti Seva. So another point we might want to say about this story of Narada, I like to say it's a Hare Krishna success story. There's, several success stories in the Bhagavatam of becoming spiritually perfected. And I think this also combines, I mentioned last time, there's the leap philosophy and the progress philosophy. And this seems to kind of combine them. Yeah.
Because it does seem to, he does follow the kind of similar steps of sadhana as anybody is recommended to do, to serve the saints, to eat their remnants, and particularly then to listen to their talks. But it seems to go very quickly. It's 4 months or something that he's spending with them. And
Yes.
in that time, he goes through what for others might take many lifetimes.
Yes, and then, I don't know, is it in the next chapter, he loses his mother, and then he meditates, and then the Lord suddenly appears, and then the Lord suddenly disappears. So there's this leap element there. I wanted to just jump again backwards to what I find is a very encouraging verse, and that's number 17. Chakva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apakvo ata patetato yadi yatra kva va abhadram abud amushakim ko varta apto abhajatam swadharmata. One who's forsaken his material occupation. It basically says, you've got everything to gain from taking up devotional service and nothing to lose. If you fail, if you slip, if you fall, there's no loss. But if you gain everything in your material life, you've actually gained nothing. So I think this chapter as a whole is also a very welcoming and encouraging as part of the broader introduction, which is the first canto of the Bhagavatam. It's saying we can do this.
And I guess that's in the Bhagavatam is going to make that point explicitly later with the story of Vritra, and how Vritra was supposed to be somebody who would kill Indra, but because of a very small mistake in pronunciation, he became a person who would be killed by Indra instead. Yeah. So on the part of ritual, the part of karma, then there's every chance of not only making or not being successful in what you're doing, but actually even creating something that will be dangerous to yourself. But on the path of bhakti, this will be different.
Yes. It's the safe and sure process. Yeah, so this story is going to continue in the next chapter, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, and it will. You mentioned already some of the things that will happen, but let's not get there yet. But it will be a quite dramatic story and an exciting story. When I was a young boy in school, still I heard about, or I read. First time I read Prabhupada's books was when I was 16, and I remember reading the first canto, and I made in arts class I made kind of a series of drawings about the sixth chapter, the next chapter. I found it to be very very inspiring and exciting. But I find this chapter to be very inspiring in another way also, and that's something that I've been thinking about recently, having read a paper by Alexander Uskokov or Atmarama Prabhu, where the paper itself was dealing with something else, but one of the points of that paper was that Vyasa is the author of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He's the one who's eventually going to write the Srimad Bhagavatam. But he's not the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The main speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the speaker of the kind of frame story, that's Sutta, but the main speaker, the kind of central speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Vyasa's son, Shuka. And in this chapter we hear of Vyasa's, this and the previous chapter, we hear about Vyasa's despondency and his sorrow over having wasted his time, not actually done what he was supposed to do. And previously it was mentioned that when Shuka, he was walking past some bathing girls. He was walking naked, and they didn't mind. They just went on with their bathing. But when Vyasa then came, then they immediately covered themselves over because they felt this person hasn't yet overcome all of his attachments. So in a sense, Vyasa is not on the same level as Shuka when it comes to detachment. So he's not the main speaker, but he is the author, he's the writer. And in that article that I was reading, the point was made that Vyasa is the author because by not being so perfect, he has empathy for others who are not perfect. He has felt suffering. He has felt unhappiness. He also knows that help is needed. And I found this to be a very, very interesting thought.
So the combination of Vyasa and Shuka is the perfect combination.
Yes.
Because the one, Shuka, is the sort of ultra-transcendentalist, and Vyasa, the father, which is ironic, he's the father of Shuka, is more a person of the world. And in a sense, the Bhagavatam is balanced between the two. So I think that's one of the elements that makes the Bhagavatam attractive and enduring. This is one of the reasons that it continues to be, as we subtitled our book, Sacred Text and Living Tradition.
Yes, indeed. And I think also this fact that it's the son who is more perfect than the father, and this kind of reversal, I mean, this is something that will happen so many times in the Bhagavatam.
Yes.
Like now with
Yeah.
Narada, the son of a maidservant,
Yes.
an illegitimate child, is going to become
Yes.
Narada, who is not just a preacher, but an acharya, a guru, the guru of Vyasa.
Yes, and he's going to be a musician as well, a Veena Pani. He's going to be a musical guru who flies through the universe and always appears at just the right moment.
I don't know if this word is used in the Bhagavatam, but in some Puranas, Narada is called Kali Priya,
Oh,
a person who is fond of quarrel.
oh, okay.
And I mean, this is one of his qualities. Not really that he's fond of fighting, but that he's fond of creating these kind of chaotic situations that will lead somehow the story of the universe or the story of the Lord's descent or something like that forward. So he's going to continually, he's going to break rules. He's going to upset people. He's going to upset Daksha very much.
Oh, yes.
And but he always does that with the kind of foreknowledge of what's going to happen. And this is something that you mentioned before, Swamiji, that he is a person who has a vision that others don't have. He remembers his previous life, for example. So I guess he can see into the future as well.
Trikalagya. Yes. I didn't know that. He is Kali. What was it? Kali
Priya.
Kali Priya. Yes. So we'll be meeting Narada more and more.
Do you have any other favorite verses of this chapter, Maharaj, that you haven't mentioned yet?
I think I've touched on the ones that kind of stand out to me. Maybe you have one or two that we should call attention to.
Yes. One word that maybe we can still discuss is the word Naishkarmya, It comes in the 12th verse. Naishkarmamapyachyuta bhava varjitam na shobhate jnanam alam niranjanam kuta punashashvada bhadramishwari na charpitam karma yadapyakaranam. Knowledge of self, and this is Prabhupada's translation again, knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible Lord. So this word Naishkarmya, that's a very, very Advaita Vedantic word, a word that Shankara uses and his followers as well, to denote something which is beyond the world of karma, beyond beyond selfishness, beyond hankering, and so on. But here the Bhagavatam is saying that that's fine, and that's obviously better than selfishness and so on. But without bhakti, without achyuta bhava varjitam, such knowledge na shobhate. Yeah.
It
Prabhupada
doesn't shine.
yeah, it doesn't look good, Prabhupada translates.
Yeah.
And I think that's a striking verse, because it really shows how this kind of non-dual Vedanta is very much in the background of the Bhagavatam. We have scholars who have argued that the Bhagavatam is kind of theistic Advaita philosophy.
Yeah.
We would call it achintya bheda, but that there's this monistic philosophy there in the background, but then on that is built then bhakti and the conception of something beyond that naishkarmya, that non-duality.
Yeah. Going back to chapter 2, what is it? Vedanti tattva vedas tattvam yad jnanam advayam, advaya jnana, the non-dual knowledge which is in the form of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So it does have this sense of non-dualism as a kind of, as you said, a kind of background to the entire understanding. Yes, maybe one other verse I think is significant is verse 18. Tasya eva heto prayateta kovido na labhyate yat brahmatam uparyadha talabhyate dukhavat anyata shukam kalena sarvatra gabira ranghasa. Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet, Hatala, Upari Ada. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time. Just as in course of time we obtain miseries even though we do not desire them. This is, I think this would be a notion which you could also find in Advaita Vedanta teaching, isn't it? Don't waste your time endeavoring for happiness in this world. You will get, you will get your due. You will get what is meant for you in course of time. But there's this interesting expression at the end, Gabhira Ram Hasa. by a subtle or a deep, I think, progress, ramhasa. Things are moving, the world is moving at its own pace, and what is meant for you will come to you in due course of time.
It's quite interesting that modern happiness studies basically is saying the same thing. Much of the happiness that people experience is genetically predestined. Some people
Oh,
just by nature experience things in a different way than others. By karma, we would say perhaps that that's there's samskaras, there vasanas, and so on. But what you actually do, of course, impacts your happiness. And if you're born as blind and so on, is going to negatively impact it. But very much is kind of predestined in a way. So you're going to get the happiness and the distress that's meant for you, pretty much regardless of what you do about it.
so this science is simply confirming what the Bhagavatam already knows.
Yes, exactly. So on that note, maybe we can finish for today. I want to thank you again, Swami Maharaj,
Well,
for
my thanks to you
joining
for
us.
this opportunity.
Thank you, and I hope to see you for more chapters later on in the series.
Indeed, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.